Hi, I'm James Verdier, and welcome to the American Institute of Biological Sciences BioScience Talks, which is a forum for integrating the life sciences. Today's episode of the show is a second dispatch from AIBS's Spring Congressional Visits Day, which is a program that gives researchers a chance to travel to Washington, D.C. to meet with their congressional representatives and advocate for their science. I had a chance to talk with a number of participants about their research, their interest in policy, and their plans for the next day's Capitol Hill visits. These events are always exciting and really quite a lot of fun. I'll include a link in the show notes for any listeners who might be interested in getting involved themselves. Our first interview of the day is with Peri Pipkin, a master's student at the California Botanic Garden, which is associated with Claremont University, and Connor Philson, who's a PhD candidate at the University of California, Los Angeles, and a graduate fellow at the Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory. Let's get right to the interview. Thank you both very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
So let's talk a little bit first about what each of you study and work on. So why don't you just, pick whoever would like to hold that microphone first and tell me a little bit about what you do.
Well, I'm Peri Lee, and I study botany. I'm currently working on a floristic inventory of the Silver Peak Range in remote western Nevada, and I'm focusing on a rare plant that only grows in the salt marshes in that area. I'm really interested in plants that are kind of having a conservation crisis.
I didn't know there were salt marshes in Nevada.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a desert salt marsh. They're pretty special groundwater dependent ecosystems. They're pretty rare. And this area just happens to be have robust geothermal energy potential as well as lithium mining potential. So compromises the ability for these plants to continue their existence in this area.
And they're only located in that one area?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the plants in the area are rare endemics, so they occur nowhere else on Earth. And so building a mine on top of their habitat would effectively wipe them off the face of the planet.
Yeah, that's got to be really difficult, especially with the big push for electric vehicles and all other potential uses of lithium and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's really challenging. I think that moving forward we're going to see a lot of these conflicts moving forward, and I think it's up to policymakers and people to figure out a way to pursue renewable energy without compromising biodiversity and causing extinction crises.
And how is that species doing right now?
It's doing okay, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not being destroyed by or climate change or threatened by it as yet.
It's probably struggling with climate change because most things tend to be, but
Right.
I'm not an expert with its climate change biology, but it's a rare plant, so it's not doing wonderful. It has a very limited distribution, but it's thriving where it is. And it's a very small wetland area.
That's great. Connor, why don't we talk about marmots, I assume?
Marmots. We study marmots. Yeah.
Okay, so where do you study marmots?
So we study them in the high alpine of Colorado, up in where you go skiing. There are marmots, and we study them there.
Okay, and so what in particular do you study about them?
Yeah, so we're interested in the evolution of social behavior. Why do marmots, and not just marmots, but all species interact with each other? What are the consequences of that? What are the drivers? Is it environmental? What are the costs of that? Is it good for you? Is it bad for you? It's important not just for humans, but for all species.
And can you just tell me a little bit about marmots' social lives? I mean, my only interaction with them has been, loud barking, very clear signals that it didn't want any social interaction with me at all. What are they like?
Yeah, if you've ever gone hiking in the Rocky Mountains or the Sierra Nevada, they eat your tent, they steal your snacks, and they scream at you. But that's their way of communicating to each other that a potential threat is present. So marmots are social out of the need to avoid predators. And so that's where the biggest benefit comes from. But there aren't a lot of benefits otherwise. So in humans, the more social you are, typically the better off you are. You live longer. You might have more kids. You live a happier life. But for marmots, that's not the case. The more connected a marmot is, the more social a marmot is. They don't live as long. They don't have as many kids. They're more likely to die in hibernation. But they are better at avoiding predators in the summer. So it's this complex trade-off for sociality in marmots.
So the basic benefit is not getting eaten, but at the expense of other things. Do they share resources?
They're not marmots. The yellow belly marmots we study in Colorado aren't like meerkats or prairie dogs. They're not cooperative. They're kind of really quirky individuals who live together to scream and yell to avoid predators.
Yeah, I mean, better to hang out with a bunch of marmots than to be eaten by a fox.
Yes, yeah. For all the costs, there's the pros outweigh the cons.
Gotcha. So let's go ahead and talk policy a little bit. And, I'm kind of interested in what sparked each of your interests in policy, and, kind of what brings you here today.
That's a good question. I think I really enjoy being, hands-on doing the science, but at a certain point, we need to communicate that, not just with the general public, but with decision makers and key stakeholders. So I've enjoyed the opportunity to broaden our skill sets and develop these new skills to communicate to different folks.
Yeah, I'd like to second those opinions. I don't have much experience with policy or science communication, so I'm here today to learn a lot, and I'm really interested in what the future is going to look like for a lot of these plants that I study and these places I study that are compromised by extraction. And I'd like to see if there's room for both human development and the continued existence of plant diversity on this planet, and how we can move forward with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Those both sound, very exciting. So you've got some meetings lined up tomorrow. Are you speaking with local representatives, senators? What's on the docket?
We're speaking with everybody. I really enjoy the AIBS training and the Congressional Visit Days. It's not just an opportunity for us to communicate not only our important science, but the importance of science in general to the United States. But it's also an opportunity to come together and meet our peers and chat science and policy and broaden our skill sets with our friends from all over the country. So it's not just about meeting with the policymakers, but this kind of like more emergent policy training is really enjoyable.
That's great. And so what will you be advocating for tomorrow?
I think broadly, increased science funding, well, not to get lost in the weeds about we need funding for this particular type of science, but all science, whether that's via the NIH or the NSF, whether that's via the DoD or the Department of Energy, it's important to have this broad science funding, not only to facilitate investigating the world and its many quirks and nuances, but also to maintain international competitiveness, to keep our American universities strong and really breaking through on these knowledge barriers to understand more about the world around us.
One last question then is, what's it been like? How are you looking forward to it? Are you terribly nervous? Are you excited? Have you been to DC before? What's this experience been like for you?
This has been really exciting, but also overwhelming. I have no experience in DC, so this has been pretty wild. I don't know what to expect tomorrow on the Hill, but I'm very interested to see how it's going to go.
If I can handle the peer review process, I feel pretty confident to handle a congressional meeting.
Yeah, Reviewer B is not going to be sitting in. Reviewer 2. Yeah, no Reviewer 2 is there. Right on. Okay, well, thank you both very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And next up, I chatted with Valentina Alvarez, who's a PhD candidate at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellow, and an American Association of University Women Dissertation Fellow. Let's go to that interview. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I was hoping we could first chat a little bit about science and, what you're working on, for your PhD.
Yeah, well, I'm doing my PhD in Hawaii, and the Hawaiian archipelago is extremely isolated. It formed where it is today. And so all of the wildlife there had to either fly or swim there or be dispersed by wind or float. And so because of that, there are no native reptiles, terrestrial reptiles in the Hawaiian archipelago that we know of. And there are an abundance of them today, and that's what I study. I study the reptiles that have been introduced to the Hawaiian archipelago. I investigate how they got there, when they arrived, where they came from, and how they're moving between the islands.
And so this is really a sort of invasive species hotspot, is it not?
It's called, it is, yeah. It's known as the invasive species capital of the world. It's been dubbed that. So it is like a common occurrence there.
Right. What kind of lizards are you studying in particular?
Yeah, so one of my lizards is Anolis sagrii. It's native. It's the common name is the brown anole. It's native to the Caribbean. It was introduced to the southeastern United States and many other places, more recently the Southern California too. But it was originally introduced to Hawaii, to the island of Oahu, and was collected in 1992, so pretty recent.
And I'm guessing it didn't swim there.
No, it did not swim there. So there are some theories as to how it got there. The botanical trade is one of the things that gets brought up a lot. And with some preliminary work, it was discovered that the lizard actually arrived there from Florida, which is another introduced region. And so exactly the mechanism and the pathway is unclear, but that's what I'm trying to figure out with my dissertation.
Okay, so they could theoretically get there by, hopping a ride on a plant or something like that.
Yeah, on a plant, on a boat, on a cargo plane, any of the above.
An abundance of possibilities. So I'm wondering, what brings you here and how long did it take you to get here from Hawaii?
Yeah, so I'm here today as a part of the American Institute of Biological Sciences.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm here to learn how to communicate science to the general public. That's really the leading reason as to why I'm here today, participating in this workshop, but also to advocate for funding in science in the federal government. I am funded by the federal government, and so I think that it's extremely important. And then how long it took me to get here. About 16 hours of travel time. There's 2 layovers, which is actually pretty good.
Wait, you're the only person who's ever spoken posiutely about layovers.
Oh,
there could be more.
Comparatively, there could be more layovers.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So you've got some meetings lined up for tomorrow, I assume, in various congressional offices?
Yeah. So I'm meeting with staff for both of the senators in Hawaii tomorrow.
Oh, that's exciting. And wow, I pity them. They must have to make that set of flights fairly often.
Yeah, that's something that I wonder about myself.
Okay, that's really cool. So you'll be sharing the message of the importance of science funding and its relevance for the ongoing research initiative.
Yeah, exactly. And to support the budget for science and the National Science Foundation in particular.
Great. And do you have any thoughts, maybe later in your career of pursuing science communication or science in the intersection of public policy? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, so I am particularly interested in the research side of science, but I think that it's important, and the reason that I'm here is because I want to become a better communicator of the work that I'm doing. And though I don't want to necessarily focus on communications, I definitely want that to be an aspect of what I do, because I think that it's as important as doing the research itself. So I'm just working on those skills, really.
Right. I appreciate that. And as one who often holds a microphone, I think you're right. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And last but certainly not least, we close out this episode of BioScience Talks with an interview of what I'm calling our Midwest contingent, consisting of Katherine Charton from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Lauren Orton from Sauk Valley Community College, and Rebecca Kauten, who's at the Iowa Lakeside Laboratory. Let's go to it. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
So we've got a group of 3 here. I was hoping we could chat a little bit about what you work on a day-to-day basis. So science stuff. Why don't we go ahead and you can get us started, Katherine, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you a little bit about my work because it's very specific to the Midwest. I work in tallgrass prairies, thinking about how we can better restore and conserve those ecosystems, specifically in the context of global change, such as novel land use histories and climate that these ecosystems are experiencing.
That's great. And so there's not quite as much tallgrass prairie left as there once was, correct?
Absolutely not. The best estimates we have are that only 1% to 2% of tallgrass prairie remains from its original extent. That would have been all the way from Texas through Wisconsin and even up into parts of Canada.
Okay, great. We'll probably chat a little bit more about that in a moment. Lauren?
So I am currently a professor of biology at Sauk Valley Community College in Dixon, Illinois. But prior to that, my research interests were in bioinformatics, and I would sequence DNA from cool season grasses and look at their chloroplasts.
Cool. I need to ask you, what's a chloroplast?
You know how plants can take sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, and turn it into food?
Yes.
That is where the magic happens in the chloroplast. So they have their own unique set of DNA outside from the rest of the plant. And so I would sequence that DNA and look at it. I would spend hours looking at nucleotides on a computer screen, but it was fascinating.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Rebecca?
So I am a social scientist by training. I teach prairie ecology and geographic information systems courses for our field station in Northwest Iowa. And the majority of my time when I'm not teaching classes, I am working with undergraduates to help them learn how to become field scientists.
That's really cool. So how do you make the move from social science into ecology?
You spend a lot of time outside. Actually, my professional experience outside of my academic life, I worked for about 15 years in watershed management, water quality monitoring. So I have a professional background that I brought to my my advanced degree.
Right. And right now your river house is underwater.
Yes, my family's weekend home on the Mississippi River is the house is not underwater, but the road to get there certainly is, and we're waiting to see what happens when the river crests.
It's a common Midwestern challenge. I take
Absolutely.
So we're here for the Congressional Visits Day, and I was hoping we could chat a little bit about when each of you got interested in any way in public policy. What excited you about it, and what brings you here?
I think I've always been interested in the intersection of science and policy because most of my science experience is working outside and working with land managers and real people dealing with problems on their land. And so thinking about how our science can better be used to inform policy to solve these problems that communities and real people are experiencing is of interest to me. And so I'm currently still in school and exploring these options, but thinking that if I can find a career that allows me to both be doing really cool science, which I'm interested in and of itself, but also make sure that science has some implication for peoples and communities.
Great. Lauren?
Well, I grew up in a family that was very policy and politically involved. And so there was an expectation from an early age to make sure that I was not only an informed voter and an informed citizen with a civic duty, but that I would definitely act upon that. And so from a very early age, I was brought out to, union events or things like that to advocate for policies to benefit workers and whatnot. So something I've had a passion for my entire life.
For me, the change happened in my mid-20s. I actually pursued a master's degree in public policy, focusing on environmental policy as a farm kid growing up in Iowa. I've seen the transformation to our landscape and the long-term effects to our environment. Spending time working in water quality and watershed management and understanding the changes that are necessary and how you go about implementing those changes means you need to understand how laws, policies, and rules are made and being a part of the process. And so I incorporate that now in my teaching as an academic in the work I do now.
That's really exciting. So we've got some meetings set up for tomorrow. With whom are you going to be chatting, and on what topics will you be discussing things with them?
Great question. So for me, I'm a constituent of Senator Charles Grassley and Senator Joni Ernst and Representative Ashley Hinson. And Chuck Grassley has, as a farmer from New Hartford, Iowa, he's essentially my neighbor. And I know has interests in not only maintaining the bioeconomy and the ag economy of our state, but looking at, fiscal responsibility, as Senator Ernst does as well, but then also thinking about jobs and STEM-ready skills in our state. We're in a state that the population is in a bit of a decline and aging as well. So we have technology needs, we have biomedical technology needs, the bioeconomy itself, but then also thinking about how we prepare young people not only to take on those types of careers, but to take on jobs and stay in Iowa.
Right.
From Wisconsin, I'm going to be meeting with Senators Ron Johnson and Tammy Baldwin, as well as Representative Mark Pocan. And similar to the situation in Iowa, in Wisconsin, we are losing a lot of our young, highly educated science and engineering degrees to jobs elsewhere. We have about 36% of our students at the undergraduate and graduate level getting degrees in science and technology, but they only about 5% of our workforce in science and technology jobs. And so we're losing that knowledge of science and technology in our state to elsewhere. And so I'm really interested in talking to my senators and representative about how we can better both train but also recruit and maintain a science workforce in Wisconsin.
And so from Illinois, I'm going to be meeting with Representative Lauren Underwood and Senators Duckworth and Durbin. And really, we're going to focus on talking about National Science Foundation funding. The state of Illinois is usually pretty good about supporting those types of things. And so I'm really excited to just kind of speak with them and show them a real life example of someone who's benefited from having NSF grants to fund my research. So.
Yeah, and I think something that all of you've highlighted is the importance of getting that funding out into the Midwest so that it can be something that will help retain the workforce, and STEM knowledge into the future.
Yeah, I think we have ample opportunity in this part of the world. The Midwest has one of the best freshwater resources in the country. We have a bunch of our agriculture in the Midwest, and I think that it's clear that there's a need for technology and science to be happening in this part of our country.
And not only that, we have the again demand for resources on a global scale that we are able to contribute in. When you think about the city of Madison, Wisconsin, and the biotechnology hub that exists there, when you think about the technological advancements, we have data centers that are now growing, not just corn in Iowa, but we have data centers. We're working with technological firms. We are working on developing hubs for biotechnology, for nanotechnology, and being able to create opportunities for those types of companies and careers in our states means we need young people with the skills and the training that those kinds of jobs demand. We need not only the technicians who can operate different types of machines, but we need the scientists and the researchers to ask big questions, to conduct their own inquiries, to be able to develop products to keep those companies competitive.
Okay, well, you've certainly convinced me, and I'm certain that you're going to convince the lawmakers with whom you meet tomorrow. Thank you all very much for joining me. I realize that I'm standing in the way of your strategizing session, although it sounds like you're ready to go. I appreciate very much your time. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
And that concludes this episode of BioScience Talks. Just a reminder, the journal BioScience is published by Oxford University Press on behalf of the American Institute of Biological Sciences and is made possible by the support of our members and donors. Thank you.